Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio. And for those of you who are regular listeners and viewers, you know that Zachary and I do a kind of, pre-game locker room huddle in terms of, what are we going to talk about for today's episode? And so, yes, everybody, this isn't scripted and, we don't have some curriculum where this is, thought out, months in advance. And so as we were doing that, I was throwing out topics, and as I was throwing out possibilities of what to talk about, you should have seen Zachary's face because he's always so supportive, but it was just kind of like and even I felt kind of like, those are kind of heavy and serious. And I recognized in myself that I just wanted a little pick me up. I just wanted, to have kind of a uplifting episode. And so, of course, the conversation for me easily goes to Ted Lasso when I want to be lifted up. And then the corollary of Ted Lasso is one of the main actors, Hannah Waddingham, who plays the boss, Rebecca, in Ted Lasso, for those of you who don't know. But she is phenomenal. She's a phenomenal Emmy Award-winning actor, but she's also a phenomenal singer and has been on Broadway in the West End. And so following her successes in Ted Lasso, Apple TV allowed her to executive produce her own Christmas special. And I know it's we're after Christmas now, but if it's still on Apple TV, everybody go ahead and watch it because it's phenomenal. It's just, like an hour and a half of pure joy. Like it's just joyful. And yes, the performance and her singing ability is just out of this world. But really the takeaway from her special, at least for me, was just how much joy there was and how much love there was. So it wasn't even about how spectacular her performance was or how spectacular her guests were performing, but it actually really was just the obvious love that was present there and personified there. And it was, her love for her parents. Mm-hmm. And then there is a special segment of her love for her daughter. And then, just peppered throughout the entire Christmas special was love that emanated from and between Hannah and her co-stars, not only from Ted Lasso, but from other shows. And I just felt like the love and the joy was almost palpable from that show. And I know, Zachary, you watched it as well.
I did. And what I also was struck by was the love that not only that Hannah had for everyone, but that people clearly had for her, right? And not just people who are directly in her sphere, meaning like her parents, who she recognized. Her mom was this well-known classical singer, opera singer, right? But also her love for communities, right? She had the London Gay Men's Chorus there, and she spoke very openly about her high regard for the queer community, and then wanted to demonstrate that by having invited them there. They were up in the booths, the special booths, singing to her, and they had changed some of the lyrics, and it was equally as playful and joyful. And they're kind of teasing her a little bit in a good way, but there clearly was just such a regard, such a love from in both directions, that not only did we, I think, fall in love with Hannah a little bit more, but we fell in love with what she's in love with and who loves her. So like, I will probably never get to meet her parents. I hope I get to meet Hannah one day. In fact, I know Elizabeth does too. But I feel like in some ways, like I know her and I know them, and there's, you know what I mean? We were brought into her circle, into her life, in such an intimate and authentic and real way.
And it was such a joy to watch the special. It was so evident the joy that, amongst the people that were present there for the filming. And so it makes me think of this relatively new book that came out. It was a collaboration between Oprah Winfrey and Professor Arthur Brooks, who is a professor at HBS, the Harvard Business School. And they collaborated on a book called Build the Life You Want. And, you would think that Arthur Brooks, being a professor at Harvard Business School, would be all about, economics and gross national product and that kind of stuff, but really his popular courses are actually about living a fulfilled life, a happier life, and so kind of the soft profits, if you will, of business. So anyway, so he collaborated with Oprah Winfrey in this book, Build the Life You Want, and they talk a lot about the pursuit of happiness. And rather than pursuing happiness as if happiness was a destination, they coined the term of happier-ness. So it's not just happiness as if it's this aha mecca moment destination, but it's just living a life of happier-ness, where finding moments throughout your day, throughout your week, to be happier and get happier. And the macronutrients, they distilled it down, the macronutrients of happiness, they boiled it down to enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. And of those three macros, they then distilled those three macros to micronutrients as well. Anyway, I digress. Back to the enjoyment component of being happier. Professor Brooks makes a very excellent and strong distinction between, we're not talking pleasure, it's enjoyment. And there's a difference between pleasure and enjoyment. Sometimes even when you find something pleasurable and you overdo it, it now no longer gives pleasure and can be detrimental. That's where we talk about things like, buffering addictions. So that's why he made a very strong distinction between pleasure and enjoyment. And so when he talked about enjoyment, what he says is one of the hallmarks of enjoyment, whereas pleasure is something you can do on your own. And when you do it on your own too much, then it's an addiction. And so that's harmful. Enjoyment, a key component of enjoyment, is a shared experience. And that's what I saw and witnessed and felt. So felt within me and then witnessed watching Hannah Waddingham's Christmas special, is this shared joy that almost kind of heightened exponentially each individual's joy because it was shared.
Mm-hmm. You're making me think of a dear friend of mine from Hawaii who I miss tremendously. So this is going to be a shout out to you, Vanessa, an avid listener of the podcast. Vanessa celebrated a milestone birthday in December. And when she was thinking about how she wanted to celebrate her birthday, one of the ways that the way that she chose to celebrate her birthday, to your point about shared experience, is that she wanted to have a concert, like a cabaret concert. She's a singer, she's a performer. I've been fortunate enough to perform with her a couple times, actually, at Diamond Head Theater in Hawaii. And she wanted to do this cabaret, but she also wanted her friends to be a part of it. And so when we were talking about it, and I said, Vanessa, people are coming to see you. Like they want to see you perform and listen to you perform. And she said, yes, but this is how I want to spend my birthday. This is, for me, what gives me so much joy and uplifts me and everything is not just standing in front of a room full of people who I know and love, but also bringing the people on stage with me who also have talents. And that is now a gift to me. And so it really was a nice nice reminder for me of exactly what you're talking about. But the way that she was making a point to say, this is the way that I want to spend my birthday. I want to spend my birthday with others, doing things that I love, and then also allowing those others to participate in it actively as opposed to passively just being part of the audience. Like, no, 45 minutes of her concert was her friends singing. which
Mm-hmm.
is exactly what Hannah did. And then to add to that, during the holiday time, I often will get like alerts of news blurbs and things of like, the 65 perfect gifts for a man, and like these are practical gifts that everyone loves, or Secret Santa gifts, etc. Like one of those kinds of things. But it had some statistics that the younger generations aren't asking for material things, they're asking for shared
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and that there's a shift or a movement toward exactly what you're talking about, which is let's spend money on an experience. Let's spend money on time together, rather than, oh, I got this object or this item or something like that.
That's and exactly, because that, to Professor Brooks's point about why sharing the experience is a component of enjoyment and not just pleasure, is because with the sharing, that communal experience now creates memories, and so now it's the memories that are the gifts that keep on giving. So that's exactly what Vanessa, that beautiful woman, I met her, I was
Yes.
so blessed that you introduced me to her. I think that she is amazing. um, but that's exactly what happens in that shared experience is, yes, it's pleasurable, but then it's heightened by sharing it, and then it's prolonged because of the memories that follow. And so
Mm-hmm.
that those are the micronutrients to the macronutrient of enjoyment that leads to being, happier-ness. And it's not about the thing. It's not even about the performance, right? I mean, I'm sure Vanessa was amazing,
Oh
but
yeah.
I can't imagine people would be commenting on how great Vanessa sounded, or how everybody else, that also performed during those 45 minutes, how they sounded. It was more just that it was done together. I mean, heck, that's why, karaoke, yes, that is how it's supposed to be pronounced, everybody, um, is Japanese. So that's why karaoke is fun, and it's fun for even people who, might not have quite the musical voice. It's still a shared experience. It makes me think of my daughter, just once again this semester, or this past semester, at her college. She performed again in this non-audition um, performance, or group performance. It's called Dance Works, at her school, and it's specifically, non-audition. So anybody and everybody can be a part of it. At the beginning of the semester, they show kind of like samples of the songs and choreography, and you as a student can sign up at your comfort level. And there are of course different, degrees of dance choreography, but it's for anybody and everybody. And I got to watch the live stream of it. I'm such a groupie, so I watched the live stream of it. And last year when I watched it, I cried, and Gracie and her friends still tease me to this day that last year I cried. It was the first time that I saw the Dance Works show. But I cried because of how inclusive it was, how celebratory it was, how positive it was. So the body positivity, that was showcased at last year's performance, and then this year's dance dance works performance. The body positivity, the multi-ethnicity, different expressions of sexuality, and yes, again, different degrees of ability, even in the same dance. So it's not like, ooh, all of the obvious,
Mm-hmm.
dancers are in this one. It's even within the same dance, you can see different levels of ability. And it didn't matter, because the shared joy and the audience, I mean, obviously these are friends of the dancers, and this is a large production. I mean, hundreds of students sign up, which I think is just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the audience is just hooting and hollering throughout the whole thing. And this shared love, and this shared support, and this shared celebration, and this shared experience of movement with music, i.e., dance. It always gives me goosebumps, because I'm just like, this is the world. This is how the world is supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
with all different colors, different shapes, different abilities, all there celebrating each other and supporting each other. That is enjoyment. That is a shared experience. That will be memories, that will be gifts that keep on giving.
Mm-hmm. And I would get to the end of my school year when I was a teacher, and we would do kind of like a year in reflection. And to support what you're saying, often the students would talk about the things that are most salient in their mind about the year was not the test or the book they read or the whatever. It was the moment, the experience, the memory that they had that brings them back to something that they lived with somebody else. So and when I was teaching first grade at a school in northern New Jersey, we studied homes. And towards the end of that particular unit, the students would create homes and like smaller but bigger versions, not like on paper, but like 2, 3, 4 foot tall replicas of the types of homes that they were studying. And this one year, one of the students was building an igloo. And the experience of doing this alone, because you're working with somebody else, that already had some of what you're talking about. But in this one particular year, as they were building the igloo, one of the students got inside and it collapsed on them. Right. Like as they were doing in a good way, like funny way. Like it wasn't like they got hurt. Yes. Thank you for clarifying, for letting me clarify. No, they were okay. It was like paper boxes and stuff. But Elizabeth and listeners, they could not stop giggling because it just to them was so funny, right? That this igloo that they were trying to make, and then they were thinking about, what would this is like for people who lived in igloos, if that ever happened to them. And then they started to giggle even more. So we got to the end of the year, we were going around like, well, what comes up for you when we reflect on this past year? And they got right back to that place of giggling and laughing and being in that same place. And the joy that happened in that moment was now reflected again, not only on their face, but then being able to share it with us. Now, we happened to be there. Nonetheless, though, all of us were transported into their place, right? We were now sharing their joy, their memories, their laughter, which was a tremendous gift for us to watch them relive. And I was reminded of, and I've spoken about him before on previous episodes, but there was an older gentleman when I lived in New York City that I would walk by on the way to the subway. I think you probably remember him. His name is Bob. And Bob just loved to talk about his life and stories that happened in his life. And he loved to recount those shared experiences because they brought him so much fulfillment, so much joy, so much love, so much, laughter, and sometimes a little pain too. It wasn't like they were always like strong, positive memories, but the ability to engage in an enjoyable way with another human were the things that he talked about, much like what we talked about at the end of our school years.
Absolutely. I can't help but I have this like smile on my face just because I'm thinking of this group of soccer moms, and we are still close to this day. But I can't help but think when I'm with them, what is it about these soccer moms? Because we've had other, soccer moms, come and go on the same teams that we've been, but this kind of core group, what is it that like has kind of kept us together all of these years, even after our daughters no longer play on a team anymore together? And it's because it all goes back to the root of a shared experience where we took a trip to Denmark with the team. And there were so many ups and downs in a good way, but there's so many like ups and downs and stories and hijinks that occurred on that team trip. And that team trip was at this point now, it's like 7, almost 8 years ago. And like I said, some of the daughters have gone on to actually, go to different teams. Yet as the mamas, we still are very close. And it all comes back to the shared experience of this crazy, 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 very unifying, but crazy, crazy, crazy Denmark trip. And then because of that bond, we've just made a point to still get together again, even if our daughters are no longer playing soccer or are in different teams, or now they're actually all in college, so they're all away. We've made a point to continue to keep making memories and keep sharing experiences with each other to stay connected. But it all comes back to that one first shared experience, and then the commitment to continue to share experiences. Because, life is not made to be, lived in, what is that life? What is that saying? Like, no man is an island.
Yes.
Um, it's very important to take care of oneself. And here, our podcast even is very self-oriented in terms of being self-aware and self-compassionate, and a lot of self and a lot of me or I, which is important and healthy. Uh, but that's all for the point of being able to show up as oneself, to then show up in life with others and for others, because life is meant to be shared, and life is meant to be experienced with others. We can fill our cup and um uh have solitude. Like, solitude is not a bad thing. Being alone is not a bad thing. But to only do that, we are actually really missing out a lot on enjoyment and then being happier. And I'm kind of coaching myself, to be perfectly honest, because in the season of life that I'm in, where so much of my life, gratefully so, I say this with such gratitude, was about my kids. And here my daughter's thriving in college, and my son is, thriving as a senior in high school and about to embark on his college experience. I won't lie. I've told you before that, though I might have tested as an extrovert, those personality tests,
Yes.
I really feel like I'm either the most introverted extrovert or the most extroverted introvert in the world, because I actually have social anxiety, and I very much prefer to not put myself out there. So if it means having to go to a icebreaker or a networking thing or a mingling thing, I'm just like, no, that's okay. I'll be at home and watch Ted Lasso or Schitt's
Yeah.
Creek, because those are my friends. You know what I mean? But I have to talk myself into, no, you used to be a social butterfly. Ironically, I used to be a social butterfly in my more insecure days. Like, I almost feel like I had to put on that persona. So now that I ironically am more kind of comfortable with myself, a little bit more secure in myself, I almost don't want to go to the opposite end of the spectrum of, well, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be a caterpillar and cocoon myself, because life is meant to be out there. And though it's a little uncomfortable for me to go to a party where I don't really know many people, or go to an event where I know nobody, I have to get out there, because life is meant to be lived, and part of living is shared experiences.
And how often have you said, I know I have said it many times, where like, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And then I come back and I'm like, I had the best time. Right. So if I really had, done what I thought I wanted at the time, what shared experience might I have missed out? Right. And when we moved to Chicago, there were so many parts of my exploration of the new city that I really, given the circumstances, was doing by myself. And that was hard, because I wanted to experience the city and what I was finding with others. And a perfect example, and I think I've talked about this before, so forgive me, is there's a ninja gym, like American Ninja Warrior. There's a ninja gym around the corner. And I went a couple times, and I was having so much fun, but I was having fun by myself. And I remember walking home. That's how close the ninja gym was from where I lived. I remember walking home being just so excited about what happened and what I learned about my own abilities, but then also sad that it wasn't something that I got to share with somebody else. And my tendency, I'm much like you, whereas like I am totally fine with like one other person, and like if I never have to do another icebreaker again, I am totally fine. If I don't have to network ever again and do a network dinner, totally fine. I will not miss that at all. But I will say that my own tendency to turtle sometimes limits me from having those kinds of shared experiences that you're talking about, really, which is at the heart of who I am. I am somebody who likes to connect with others, and felt that deeply on that walk home, just being like sad that there wasn't an opportunity to do that with somebody else and have that shared experience with somebody else.
And if I may add, and again, I'm kind of coaching myself, it's absolutely wonderful, obviously, to share experiences with those we love,
Mm-hmm.
those that we know and hang out with. Like, I mean, I'm thinking back to Hannah Waddingham's Christmas
Yeah.
special, where clearly, right, she's surrounded by the people that she loves and knows and loves her back.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like pure joy. But there's also joy to be found in little moments of a shared experience with strangers,
Mm-hmm.
going, grocery shopping and, striking up a conversation. Now, as as nowadays that might sound weird, like, what, strike up a conversation with a stranger? And yeah, maybe they will look at you as weird, like, go away, I'm just here to get my food for dinner, why are you talking to me? But there's that possibility of gaining a brief moment of a shared experience. I think that possibility of gaining that moment is worth the cost of, ooh, that was awkward, and that person didn't want to talk to me even though I tried to strike up a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's it's awkward when like you're ignored, or they look at you with like a totally blank face, or even look at you in this day and age of stranger anxiety, look at you with apprehension. Yeah, that's awkward and that sucks. And okay, that's a cost to what, one's ego, right? But in the grand scheme of things, if on the other hand you strike up a great conversation, then what a wonderful gain for that moment. What a wonderful gain for that day. I'm once again coaching myself. See, listeners and viewers, like, I don't talk because I've got all the answers. Like, it's teaching myself, or physician heal thyself. It makes me think of, I was at the airport, and I was here in Honolulu, and I was waiting to get on my flight to visit my daughter on the East Coast, and the flight was delayed, and people were getting, just a little bit ornery, understandably, because we were delayed, and you could hear kind of conversations everywhere. But I was happy because I had my earphones, and
Uh-huh.
and then for a while I was even FaceTiming my daughter. So I'm like, okay, nobody bother me. I have my seat here at the gate, but I'm at the end,
Yeah.
so at least
Yeah.
I'm safe on my right side, because nobody can sit next to me on the right side. But lo and behold, this slightly elderly couple plunked right down
Yeah.
next to me on my
Yeah.
left. And I like even made like this face to my daughter during FaceTime, like, oh, I don't have I don't have my personal
Uh,
radius of space. And we even had a joke, because there was another couple on a previous flight that I had been on with my daughter like a year prior, that was like so talkative that it was just a little bit too much for us.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's a couple we joke about a lot. So I was joking with my daughter at this gate on FaceTime, like, oh, hope they're not going to be chatty like,
Uh-huh.
that couple last year, remember? So, I was being kind of, privately snarky and very much like protective of, like, nobody look at me. I swear, if I had like sunglasses and a baseball cap on, I would have like, hid in that. And why, I don't know. What's the big deal? Why am I closing myself off? I'm at an airport gate. What's the big deal? I'm not like
Yeah.
some movie star or anything. Why? Like, well, I'm just laughing at myself even now telling the story. Like, what's the big deal? Why was I behaving that way? But anyway, long story longer. Sorry, everybody. I got off the phone. I got off FaceTime with my daughter. And so then I was just sitting there. And sure enough, the woman next to me starts just asking questions like, oh, I couldn't help but notice that,
Yeah.
is that your daughter? And is she in college? And like, I'm trying to keep my answers kind of short and not
Yep.
really doing too much follow-up questions. And this woman just kept going. So I'm like, you know what, Ignacio, relax. What the hell? Have a conversation. And can I just tell you, it was like the most lovely conversation. And ironically, there's actually a small connection that she had to my daughter's school. So it made the conversation just that much more lively and personal, to the point where we finally boarded. And when I got in my seat on the airplane, I had to FaceTime my daughter back and told her, oh my goodness, you'd never guess the couple that was sitting next to me, knows this and is connected to your college this way. And it was just so funny. And I reprimanded myself with self-compassion, but I reprimanded myself of like, you totally would have missed out, Ignacio, if you just kind of walled yourself off, and had kind of a closed off, roll your eyes, don't talk to me right now kind of attitude. That was a long story. Sorry, everybody, but it's
No.
just I'm reprimanding myself because it's a lesson learned of like life is meant to be lived out there and shared. And of course, there are moments of
Yep. Oh yeah.
privacy and solitude and refueling, but it doesn't have to be all the time and every time. And probably doesn't, I don't even really need to do that as much as I think that I need to, and that maybe I feel that I need my moments of solitude and privacy more because I'm fearful and uncomfortable of being out there and putting myself out there to share experiences.
I'm picturing you in that lounge, kind of looking like, what came to my mind is you're Dr. Incognacio at that point, because you're definitely giving off the don't talk to me energy, which I do all the time. And then I'm laughing because truthfully, what I find so fascinating about that, and my connection to another example is going to show up in just a second, but you are all attempting to do kind of the same thing. Like there's already a shared experience built in. You are all going to get on the plane and go to another location together. You know what I mean? And yet we somehow ignore that, or just like overlook it. Sometimes importantly, like for our own sake, as you mentioned, maybe there's some self-preservation there. We really just need to be by ourselves. But why I thought of this when you were talking is that it reminds me of often when I go to the gym first thing in the morning, I see the same people. Like really often see the same people. It's 6:15, 6:30 in the morning. There's a certain kind of person that likes to go at that same time, and we tend to be the same people. Why? We don't even acknowledge each other's presence. There's not even like a, hey, I see you every morning. You are part of my life, my world, right? We have a shared experience. We are committed to being at the gym, blah, blah, blah. So we have some stuff in common. And yet we've got our headphones on. We've got the don't talk to me face. We give the attitude if somebody like looks like they're going to take our machine or whatever. And I myself, I'm very, very guilty of this. The other day, this individual was like looking at me, and the person I see all the time. And my immediate reaction was like, what? Do you need something? As opposed to like, hey, you know what I mean? But you're absolutely right. We are literally in the middle of a common purpose, like a shared moment that happens again and again and again. And yet my immediate reaction is to be like, wall, don't talk, headphones, stern face, throw some weights around, Why? Anyway, that's what I thought of.
I can't answer that because I'm guilty of that as well, So and the funny thing too, specifically, I will say this specifically at like airports, I kind of wall myself off because what I found multiple times, it's almost too frequent, is strangers often lead, at least in America. So what do you do?
Yep.
And whenever I say, physician or surgeon, then I find myself now I'm basically in an office visit with a patient now, because now they're asking me about this and showing me that, and their doctor said this. What do I think? So I find myself like, in a moment of self-preservation, like not saying that I'm a physician and just making up some career. And I try to find I try to come up with, some like esoteric occupation or a career where it's kind of hard to follow up with more questions so that, the conversation can kind of end right there.
Yeah.
And, I realize, what's the big deal? Or, so they know that I'm a physician, have a short little conversation. Maybe rather than not having the conversation, what I need to work on is learning how to steer the conversation differently, and graciously, so as not to wall myself off or put off this like don't talk to me energy, but just, have control, script the conversation a little bit to veer it in a different way. Self-preservation is important.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's where, times of solitude and recharging, is necessary and healthy. But sometimes I'm just thinking out loud now to myself. Sometimes self-preservation is at our own harm, to be honest.
Yes.
I think of like, okay, I could, if I wanted to, when it's raining really hard, put up an umbrella and the umbrella will shield me. But if I'm so afraid of being exposed to the hard rain that, better keep the umbrella up
Mm-hmm.
anyway, just in case, boy, it's amazing the sunny days that I will be missing out on, always holding this umbrella to preserve me. When sometimes, you know, peek out from the umbrella and see, it's actually not even raining. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a beautiful sunny day. What am I doing carrying around this shield of an umbrella? Sometimes self preservation is not self preservation at all. It's actually self harm.
I would say, and even on a rainy day, could there be benefits of feeling the rain on you? So even more so, yes, that is what the umbrella is designed for, to use your metaphor, to protect you. But even just the opportunity, and you talk about this so often on the podcast, the ability to connect in nature with nature. I mean, to just stand in the rain and feel that on you. Now, I'm not saying to the point where you get pneumonia or something like that, but even more so, the opportunity to see that maybe sometimes we don't always know what is best for us, or what we think is best for us is not always best for us. Maybe it's most often, but maybe not always. I was lucky last summer. I got to go see Pink in concert at Wrigley Field. And I know, without trying to make this all about a performance episode where we talk about Hannah and my friend Vanessa and Pink, to your point about being open to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my takeaway out of this is just the ability to recognize those times when I'm not open to it, and maybe give some space to be more open than my natural tendency might be, particularly at the gym. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe at the gym, I will just not have my headphones on one day. Like just that act of like putting them
Yes.
down for once. It doesn't have to be every day, but just to give myself a little bit of space to be like, how open am I to the possibility that I could engage with another person in a shared experience?
Mm-hmm.
And why I bring up
Mm-hmm.
Pink is because this concert was amazing. Amazing. Dancing, singing, she's flying, there's acrobats, and her daughter comes on stage. Like, it's just visually and auditorily just an experience. I look over next to me, and the woman next to me is loving her life, loving it. She saw her. This is like the second or third time that she's seen her perform, but the person that's with her is not loving it at all. Not at all. Okay. And but this obviously wasn't like my place to say anything, but eventually I just said, are you okay? You're not enjoying yourself? And she's like, it's really loud. And she was right. I mean, it's a concert, right? It's supposed to be loud. And I said, yeah, I understand. I said, but for me, part of that is the experience. Part of that is like, and I'm not trying to talk her through her feelings. I could just tell that,
Mm-hmm.
like, she was in a space. By the end of that concert, she like grabbed my hand and she just said, thank you. I wasn't really having a good time, but I saw how much fun my friend was having and how much fun you were having. And it got me past whatever my issues or concerns were. So she
Oh.
started very closed, I would say, like, and I wasn't trying to like push her into a place, but something within her switched where she started to kind of open herself up a little bit more, maybe take that umbrella down, see that there was some sunshine worth acknowledging, or some nature. And that moment really struck me, not only how amazing the concert was, but this stranger, like, we impacted each other's lives. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
she may or may not have been open at the beginning. Maybe I was or wasn't, but eventually we both realized that we were. And look, I'm telling the story now. So like, it is now a shared experience that I'm sharing with all of you.
It's so funny. As you're telling the story, I actually thought of something and then it brought tears to my eyes. Have you seen, it's one of my all-time favorites. Have you seen the Heineken commercial Worlds Apart?
No.
Okay, so think about how we talked about, in the beginning of this episode of Arthur Brooks's point of the difference between pleasure
Mm-hmm.
and enjoyment, and how interestingly with pleasure, something can give you pleasure, but especially when you notice that like you're doing it alone,
Mm-hmm.
that's not enjoyment. And if you do find that you're doing it alone frequently, now perhaps that's where addictions come in, and that's
Mm-hmm.
actually harmful, right? And so, you never see a beer commercial, a Heineken commercial, or really any commercial of joy where somebody's doing it by themselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
always like, hey, the buddies are together, or the girls are, drinking champagne at spa day together. Like it's always a group thing, right? So in thinking of that, and Heineken in particular. So Heineken did a phenomenal commercial, and it's called Worlds Apart. And what it is um, there's a room and two different people they don't know each other. And in fact, they didn't know that there was going to be somebody else in that room. And they're given instructions, and they are tasked to build something. And often, one of the tricks is that the instructions were given wrongly to the other person. So they then realize while they're trying to build this, like, oh, I think I have your instructions. So then they end up helping each other. Then turns out they build a stool. Then the next phase of the test, the study that they don't even know that they're a part of, is now they have to build something bigger, and this time it's together, and it's this big monstrosity of a thing. And when they put it together, it turns out they've built a bar, and they are instructed, put the stools next to the bar. And then the next phase is watch this video. Okay. And so the two strangers stand next to each other, and the two videos are projected on the wall. Now, here's the kicker. Before they ever even met, these strangers did interviews on video. And one is and there were like multiple groups of two. So in one twosome, the woman was a staunch feminist, and the male was an absolute sexist. And they're saying their views in their interview. Another group of two, there was a racist, and then the other person was a person of color, and a staunch advocate person of color. And then the third group of two was transgender, and obviously a homophobe. Okay, so that's the backdrop, right? Well, guess what? After the bar was built and the stool was built, and the two strangers were instructed, stand in front of and watch the video, and they each standing next to each other so they can kind of like feel each other's vibe as they're watching the video. They're seeing what the other stranger has declared. So now they know what they feel about each other's stereotype. And I specifically say stereotype. I didn't say person, stereotype. Right. So now they know. So now the last part of this study commercial, and it was real, by the way, so this wasn't like actors doing it. The last part was, you have a choice. There are two beers on the bar that you created together. You have the choice of grabbing a beer, because you did your job well done, grab the beer and walk away, or you can sit down together with the beer and talk with each other. And to a person, except one, and let me tell you the one. So the one person who was the absolute homophobe, who was talking to the trans woman, she was transgender and he was a homophobe. He took his beer as she was walking to the bar to sit down. He took his beer and he walked off. And then he came back and said, just kidding. And he sat down, and they had the conversation. And all three groups opted to stay to have the conversation. And at the end of the conversations, they show clips of literally they're being open to each other, wanting to continue the conversation, exchanging phone numbers. I mean, it was beautiful. And I know this is a long story, guys, but literally, like, I have tears in my eyes because it was just so beautifully done and it was real. Watch, go Google on YouTube Heineken World Apart. It was an amazing display of humanity where a shared experience can break down walls, even reveal, wrong assumptions and wrong stereotypes. I mean, it was beautiful. Oh, they truly, in these groups, they got great examples of the polarity that we have in society. And yet, as individuals, if we first look for a shared experience, how that can break down walls. Heineken, Worlds Apart. Gotta watch it.
Even the title is fascinating. Not so worlds apart, really. I mean,
Not
that's
so worlds
maybe how they
apart.
started.
Yeah,
Um,
it was beautifully done.
I'm going to go look at. I haven't seen it, but I can say that we often think about how we want to wrap up an episode. Elizabeth and I, being teachers, and also wanting to put a cute little button on an episode. I don't think that there is a bigger charge for us that we could have even planned than what you just shared. That perfectly captures, I think, where we went in this episode. Because I imagine those people, if they had been asked, would you sit down with your person worlds apart, let's say, okay, so if it's somebody who has like deep seated homophobic thoughts, beliefs, etc., would you sit down and have a beer with a transgendered person? They probably would have said absolutely not, right? But now
With
here after,
profanity,
right, right. And,
right?
and same maybe for somebody who's transgendered. Would you sit across the bar and have a beer with somebody who is blatantly, or who endorses strong homophobic beliefs, et cetera? Probably not. So, I'm not vilifying any side of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Good
Um,
point.
but
Excellent point.
but I think, look at what the power of that is, and also the power of being open to it, right? Look at
Mhm.
how much we can change and grow, and actually um be better versions of ourselves to then show up for somebody else, and how open we might become to hearing a different perspective, or a different belief, or make a new friend, even if that may not change us all that much. Just that experience alone has changed us. So
Mhm.
I feel like you just took a story and used it as the perfect way to capture and close up an episode with a really good charge, at least for me, and I think also for our listeners also, which is, think about the openness of those people at the beginning, and then their openness at the end, because they had that shared experience with another human, without a label or anything, just another human, and then what that did for their ability to connect with them.
Exactly. And as much as, we espouse, as people and as on the podcast, how healing and how important and how necessary it is to self-reflect and
Mm-hmm.
have self-compassion and work on oneself and honor oneself. The whole point of being our favorite self ultimately is actually not just to live life for ourselves or experience life for ourselves, but it's actually for sharing life and shared experiences, bringing our favorite self to experience life with others.
So, listeners, remember that we are not just simply enough,
We are all more than enough.
just as we are.
And just as we are, we can all come together to share rather than being worlds apart. Period.
Period. Mwah.